Welcome to our webinar, Driving for Better Business, where we examine how you can support your drivers, set expectations, maintain standards and stay safe. Within the last few years, the relationship between the driver and the operator has become a lot more complicated. In some cases, the driver is seen as the customer, paying commission, buying work. In other cases, the driver becomes a supplier, fulfilling work on behalf of the operator for account customers. In some cases, the driver is fully self-employed. In others, claim to be workers, and still others, they can be employed. And that really begs the question, depending on their status, should the operator be involved in training the driver, having expectations, or should they not train at all? We're very lucky to have with us today a representative from the National Highways who promotes a scheme called Driving for Better Business, which supports any company where driving professionally is the service they offer. So on the website, you can see for yourself there's lots of tools to support you as you train your drivers or as you set up policies or set expectations. You can review how you operate and find out what the gaps are, and Driving for Better Business will support you. So now let's go over to Mark and hear what he's got to say.
My name's Mark Cartwright. I'm the team leader for the Commercial Vehicle Incident Prevention Team at National Highways, and I'm also, and this is the most civil service job title you'll have ever heard in your life, I'm the Senior Responsible Officer for our Driving for Better Business programme.
So Driving for Better Business has been to the Private Hire Taxi Monthly show the last couple of years, had a stand that I've been involved in. Can you tell me what Driving for Better Business is all about?
Oh, right. Where do we begin? Driving for Better Business, let's be clear, it's funded by National Highways, so it's part of the government scheme. That has a lot of benefits, to be honest, for users, in so much as because the lovely taxpayer has already paid for what we do, and it's all free to use for anybody that wants to use any of our resources. So it's all good stuff, but it's all free to people that want to use it. Our sole aim is to try and raise the awareness of the levels of risk that are associated with driving of any kind, whether it's a van, a truck, a car, a taxi. It's all a dangerous thing. For most of us, it's probably the most dangerous thing that any of us do on any regular kind of basis. So it's all about raising awareness that that is the case. And once we've raised awareness that that's the case, it's actually then providing the tools and the advice and the support that organisations and their drivers might need to actually be doing it in a less risky manner, if that makes sense. So it's all about raising attention, grabbing people's attention, and then helping make the roads a little bit safer for all of us.
Thank you. And Driving for Better Business, on the whole, tends to assist and support those who own their own fleet vehicles. But we also have this area of grey drivers, which I think the taxi industry falls into. Can you tell us a little bit about how you can support the grey drivers?
Yeah, our resources are available for everybody. Our strategy, and it's the way we need to do it because we haven't got an endless budget, is, to be blunt, is to engage with the employer, although the individuals, the organisations that are contracting the business, to cascade through them the resources that we have. So yes, we'll work with transport businesses to cascade it through to their truck and van drivers. We'll work with other organisations to cascade it through to their company car drivers, or grey fleet drivers. But the taxi industry is different shape, we know that. But the resources are all there available for anybody who wants to use them. As an individual driver, they're all available. Equally, they're available for their employers, or even some of the kind of consolidation programs that are out there where people can, get access to the data. We really don't mind how people get to it as long as they use it.
And what sort of access and support can they get?
Oh, there's all sorts there. It's something we've become very conscious of over the last few years. The majority of the issues which lead to crashes are the same, regardless of whether you're driving an HGV, a van, a car, a taxi, a powered two-wheeler, and it's primarily around driver. Let's call it issues, but I'm going to be very, very clear. We're not trying to single the drivers out as being the cause of crashes. It could be those around other drivers around our drivers, but it's typically around human behaviour, and all of the resources that we have in there are leading to that kind of casualty reduction. So although some of the materials which will be available to your viewers and people at on the webinar is, they might not look like them. There might be a picture of a van attached to it. But the point I'm making, the issue behind that is exactly the same, whether they're driving a van or whether they're driving a taxi. So the information is all there, it's all available. And we've gone to great lengths to try and write it in a sensible, practical kind of way. And one of the things that we talk about forever is, of course, it's important that your vehicles and your drivers are compliant with the law of the land. I would take that as a given. But actually, most of the risk, and we'll talk about that in terms of causations, is around the softer stuff around it. It's around attitudinal stuff. It's the way that the drivers are approaching their job, and the way that people are acting as a professional driver, which at the end of the day is of course what they are.
Thank you. So a lot of your resources are about drivers being safe in poor weather, drivers' mental health conditions. So you're really trying to encourage operators to train their drivers in-house and provide materials for that. Why would you say it's important that drivers get in-house training?
It's important that whether it's formal training or whether it's just reading an article on a website or on social media or a little bit of video that we'll put out, it's about trying to get people to think about this. You know, for example, I mean, a lot of people don't realise this, is typically 5 people will die on UK roads every day. Today, tomorrow, the day after. And it rarely makes the news in any particular way. But obviously, you know, there's some terrible crash of a bunch of lads wrapping themselves around a tree, and, you know, that will make the national news, and rightly so. But just that general noise, if you like, of the fact that it's kind of accepted that 5 people will die on our roads every single day. And that's 5 families that have been destroyed. That's 5 police officers having to walk up somebody's drive and give them the terrible news that somebody's not coming back home. And there'll probably be somewhere in the region of 8 to 10 times as many people involved in what we've started to call life-changing injuries, serious injury. And even that gets kind of just lost away in the noise, I think, to a certain extent. Life-changing injury just rolls off the tongue. Stop and think what a life-changing injury is. It's a life-changing injury. You might not walk again, you might not see again, you might not be in a position to play with your kids or your grandkids, go to work, etc. This will change that individual's life forever. But somewhere along the lines, it's kind of accepted as the cost of doing business. Oh, there's going to be some crashes today and people are going to get hurt and people are going to die in there. And what I'm very keen to get across is that in the great majority of the cases, those crashes, the initial cause of that crash wasn't anything to do with the vehicle. Almost without exception, it's something to do with driver behaviour. Now, that doesn't mean to say, and I'm not giving everybody an excuse to run around with no tread on the tyres, let me be very clear about that. Of course, the vehicle condition is important, but the initial cause, almost without exception, is around something to do with driver behaviours, either our driver or other drivers around them. And that isn't to say that the vehicle condition, the load security, all the rest of it didn't make things get worse quickly once that initial causation, once that match had been lit, if you like, on the fire. We talk a lot about what we call the 5 known unknowns. Let me be clear, the reason we call them known unknowns is we know they're in the mix. We're not necessarily quite sure of the proportionality of the scale of it. We've got a lot of work going on that at the moment. So if you think of it as a 5-circle Venn diagram, you know, those kind of pie-shaped diagrams, Venn diagrams, is we know the circles are all there. What we don't know is how big the circles are in proportion to each other and what the crossovers are, and we're working on that. But the 5 known unknowns: distraction. Mobile phones, touch screens in vehicles have probably killed more people over the last 10, 15 years than anything else in one go. It's so easy to be distracted. Be disciplined. Don't. Put the thing away. Hands-free mobile phones, to be blunt, from a safety point of view, okay, it's legal, but it's not really any safer than using a handheld phone because the cognitive distractions are still there, etc. So distraction is number 1. Fatigue, and this is of course something to be very much aware of in the taxi industries with somebody on social hours that the guys are working. Fatigue, you know, we've all probably done the noddy dog routine when we've been driving, is stop. That's a learn. Don't get into that position in the first place. And there's a lot of old wives' tales about how you can get yourself out of it quickly, but that's exactly what they are. They're old wives' tales. The only way to do it really is to stop, rest, and restart. So distraction, fatigue, impairment. People tend to think about the fun stuff when we talk about impairment, the alcohol and the recreational stuff. And yes, there is a good chunk of that about. But there's actually an awful lot of self-medication, over-the-counter, or even prescribed drugs, which can have a serious effect on your ability to drive in a safe and proper manner. And the last of these is medical conditions. We know that people spend a lot of time sitting behind the wheel of a vehicle aren't necessarily always prime specimens of physical health, and that will apply into it. There's a lot of diabetes. There's a lot of undiagnosed diabetes. There's a lot of blood pressure, hypertension, obesity, all the rest of it. They all contribute, and you've probably done the counting there. That's 4 of the 5 known unknowns. The 5th one is a bit of a cop-out, which is mistakes and carelessness and all the rest of it. But again, even within those, they'll almost always have something to do with the other 4 or a combination of the other 4. So it's about human performance. And the challenge to us all is that's actually, it's a more challenging thing for businesses and individuals to get to grip with. Something we talk about quite regularly. You can imagine somebody in a business asking a driver to go and check their tyres out again, or make sure all the lights are working on the vehicle or whatever, and off they'll go, and it's a yes or no, and if it's a no, they know what to do with it. Going up to somebody and telling them, mate, you look absolutely knackered. Have you had any sleep? Or have you had a good night last night, by the look of it? That's more difficult, that's more challenging in an organisation. It's even more difficult, I would argue, perhaps in a personal basis if you're the driver and effectively your own manager. But that's what kills you. That's what causes crashes.
Thank you. So that's really food for thought. So your website is free to sign up to,
Absolutely.
and operators will be able to access materials to help them train drivers to be safer in their approach and their methodology.
Absolutely. There are a couple of things I'll perhaps highlight in there, Rachel. We have a very good gap analysis tool. So that will step you through as an employer of drivers as to where you're kind of a gaps are in your risk management. Once we've highlighted those to you, we can then point you in the direction of some of the tools that we have within our website to help you remedy those. So we've got a policy builder tool, for example. The foundation of anything you're going to be doing is having good policies. Does everybody understand what's expected of them and what the ramifications of not delivering against that is? So we've got that. We've also got our car driver toolkit, which isn't specifically designed for the taxi and the private hire, but clearly there are a lot of parallels in there for them to pick from. And you've already mentioned, for example, weather conditions, the impact of fatigue, all the impact of speed on incidents and all that kind of good stuff. So there's a load of resources there already. That includes some toolbox talks again, which businesses might want to share. So there's a load of resources in there. But the first thing I would suggest is a gap analysis and understand where the business's exposures are, and then we can start helping you plug the gaps on those.
Thank you. So, as we mentioned, there's a lot of grey fleet in taxis, owner drivers. The operators don't own the vehicles. Do you think that in any way provides a little bit less responsibility? What's your
No,
thoughts
not
on
at
that?
all. Not at all. I don't. I mean, the way we look at it is the only difference between a grey fleet vehicle and a non-grey fleet vehicle is how the vehicle's been financed. And it's been financed by actually the drivers financing it. The obligations and the responsibilities, both from a legal point of view and indeed an ethical point of view, are exactly the same. That business has duties under the health and safety at work legislation to ensure that the vehicle is safe and legal, that drivers safe and legal. Exactly the same as they would do if it was an owned or a leased vehicle. And of course, the ethical responsibilities and the duties of that individual, they're still exactly the same. So I think grey fleet just creates confusion in there. It's a vehicle. You manage that vehicle properly and safely.
Thank you. And there's a lot of concern in the taxi and private hire industry that drivers are self-employed, therefore we can't make them into employees. Does that adjust how an operator might train them or consider
Again,
training them?
not at all, Rachel, to be honest. We've taken quite a lot of legal advice on this, and we know the measure that the courts will tend to use in deciding whether somebody is legitimately self-employed or isn't very often comes around to the amount of control that organisation imposes upon that driver. all the legal advice that we've had is absolutely there's no reason why an organisation can't be very clear about their safety expectations and the risk expectations of that driver. That wouldn't influence the court's decision one way or the other as to whether or not that driver. Telling them to go to A to B and do it in a blue car might do. But actually just saying, look, guys, you need to be very confident about your obligations to be doing this in a safe and risk-free manner as we can do. That wouldn't affect the court's judgment at all.
Okay, so if you were to encourage operators now to take the next step, none of them have used Driving for Better Business, what would you encourage them to do?
Have a play, log on. There's no cost, there's no catch. I promise you that. Is have a look. And I know sometimes we do get accused when it looks a little bit too good to be true. But as I mentioned earlier, the government's already, taxpayers already paid for it, so it is good. But get on the site, have a look. And what I always say to people, if they like it, if they find something in there that's good and useful, share it, talk to people about it. If it's not right, talk to me and we'll fix it. And it's as straightforward as that. All we are ever trying to do is provide people with the information and knowledge that they need to understand the level of risk that's attached to driving, regardless of the vehicle type and the role that the drivers are in, and also some pretty straightforward remedies. And I know this might sound a bit flippant, but please forgive me, but it's not actually that complicated. A fact that absolutely astounds me to this day is 25% of the people that die in crashes in the UK weren't wearing a seatbelt at the time of the crash. And forgive me for putting it this way, what a stupid way to die. So a lot of the stuff is actually really simple and straightforward. And to be brutally honest, the drivers will know it anyway, it's just that they're not doing it. To slow down a little bit, we've got all kinds of statistical evidence that will show you don't actually get, doesn't slow your journey time down particularly, but it will make you safer during that journey. So slow down, stick to the speed limits. You know, don't get tempted to be using the screens. Put your seatbelt on and make sure your vehicle's in reasonable nick. It's not that difficult.
And do you think the operator has the right to demand those checks and enforce in-house training of drivers, even if they are self-employed?
Absolutely. Health and safety law legislation is very, very clear. Is that responsibility extends to everybody within that organisation, and any culpability following an incident will follow that lines of culpability up. So there's no point sitting there and saying, oh, he's self-employed driving, nothing to do with me. We have lots of conversations in the final mile delivery sector around this who have a kind of a fairly similar model. And it's absolutely not an excuse. Absolutely not.
And what's the goal of Driving for Better Business? What do you want to see achieved by people using your materials?
We want to see an improvement. It sounds a bit strange sometimes when I say this, is bearing in mind, I mentioned 5 people, 4.6 is the actual figure, will die every day on our roads, the latest figure. So we have about 1,640 people a year. A good proportion of those were either at-work drivers or people who've been taken out by at-work drivers. And our ambition is to take that figure down to the only acceptable number, and that number's 0. And I know that is, ridiculously ambitious, but that's the only number we can be going for. So every single death that we can avoid, we can save, we can mitigate, is exactly the aim of DFBB.
It's a fantastic goal, and I know you're doing great work. I'm glad you're staying on to answer some questions. We'll have some for you at the end. But now the thing to be said is we'll put the website in the chat. We'll make sure everyone's got access to it, and we look forward to you having operators sign up.
Fantastic. And please put my contact details in as well, Rachel. So if you put those in there, then we can make sure if people do have any feedback from us, let us know. As I say, if you like it, use it. If you don't like it, let us know. We'll try and fix it.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your time today.
Pleasure, Rachel.
So please do put your questions in the chat. Mark will answer them at the end of our webinar. You'll also see here the website drivingforbetterbusiness.com, and Mark's email will also be put in the chat so you can contact him on a one-to-one basis afterwards. Thank you for listening.